Joining us now to tell us more is Gerald Feierstein. He's a distinguished senior fellow for diplomatic engagement at the Middle East Institute. He was also the U.S. ambassador to Yemen under former President Barack Obama. Ambassador Feierstein, thank you very much for your time today. So we've got the war in Gaza, we've got Israel-Lebanon border clashes, the attack in Beirut, and now the bombing in Iran. Just how concerned are you by the signs and indications of the regional tensions potentially escalating and spreading further?
It's a pleasure to be with you today, and I think that this is exactly the right question. It's the series of incidents that you mentioned, as well as the deployment of an Iranian warship to the Red Sea, where it potentially will be coming into contact with U.S. and allied navies. And all of these issues have the potential of being a triggering point for a new round of escalatory fighting. So this moment is very concerning. I think that there are parties on perhaps both sides who are trying to calm the situation back down, but it is a tense moment.
Ambassador, let's focus in on Iran. So this latest attack, it comes a week after the chief of Iran's Revolutionary Guard vowed to eradicate the, quote, Zionist regime after an alleged Israeli killing of a top advisor there. How likely would you say is Tehran to take military action?
Well, I think, again, until now, the assumption has been that the Iranians wanted to avoid getting dragged into the Gaza conflict. They've said that themselves over time, that they don't want to be a party to this conflict. And I think that they still recognize that overall their interests would suffer if they became active combatants in this situation. So again, while the Iranians feel the need to make very strong statements and express outrage, it's not clear that they're going to respond, particularly because what happened in Kerman today, while they've been very quick to accuse the U.S. and Israel, there's really no evidence to suggest that that the Israelis had anything to do with this.
And Ambassador, I want to get your reaction to the recent killing of the senior Hamas leader in Beirut. Some experts are calling it a gamble. Some say the benefits are unclear. What's your take on the strategy behind this? Could this backfire?
Well, I think that this is, once again, it's a very typical kind of Israeli response to these incidents. They have a long record of undertaking these kinds of assassinations against people that they consider to be enemies, threats to their security. They said after October 7th that they would go after Hamas leaders wherever they were. I would think that in this particular instance, it was a relatively easier target than perhaps some of the other Hamas leaders elsewhere in the region. So I think that they accused this individual of being at least in part responsible for what happened on October 7th, and it's not at all surprising.
The European Union foreign policy chief says the world must impose a solution to the Israel-Hamas war. What would that look like? How likely is that to happen?
Well, I don't think it's very likely at all until the Israelis and Hamas have made a decision that they're going to stop fighting. Until then, I don't see that there's really much of a diplomatic opportunity to engage. Once the fighting is over, I think that by all means, the international community will have a role, must have a role to play in trying to rebuild, reconstruct, resecure the situation in Gaza. But until then, I think that the only thing that can really be done is to continue efforts to try to get the two sides to come to some kind of an agreement on a ceasefire, on stopping the fighting.
And Ambassador, you earlier mentioned this escalating Houthi attacks on cargo ships in the Red Sea, and now that more than a dozen countries, including the U.S., jointly warned the militant group to stop the assault or else. Could this statement be enough to restore deterrence? Because some experts say without any major response will only make these attacks more frequent.
The problem that we have in the Red Sea with the Houthis is that the tools that might be available to inflict major significant harm to the Houthis are really very, very few. They're not a sophisticated military. They don't have a lot of facilities or other kinds of targets that one might go after, and to some extent. Politically, the Houthis may see some advantage in trying to draw the U.S. and its allies into that kind of military response. So the best thing right now for the U.S. and its allies is to continue the defensive measures that they have pursued so far. They are for the most part, succeeded in avoiding or mitigating any kind of damage that the Houthis might be able to inflict. The biggest issue, of course, is the concern that the international shipping community has in continuing to send their cargoes through the Bab el-Mandeb and the Red Sea. Over the longer period, if this persists, it will have an impact on the global economy, and that may force a more aggressive response. But it's not at all clear that even a more aggressive response will change the Houthi calculation.
Yeah, a tumultuous situation in the region, to say the least. Thank you very much for your analysis today, Ambassador. We are speaking to Gerald Feierstein, a distinguished senior fellow for diplomatic engagement at the Middle East Institute.